Okay, so we can start. It's 5 minutes later. So today I want to present you the how the architectural drivers influence the final shape of our product. It's most connected with DPS. But first I want to introduce myself because currently we are in pandemic time, and 1 month ago I was with the guys from Identity in DevOps, and we are working together 2 years, but we had a chance to see first time each other, so I think this is the good opportunity to introduce. So I started my journey in Oberthur, currently IDEMIA, in 2015. We had a office in Niciarniana at the time, and we had a very nice product, motion code, which was connected with the dynamic card, with the electric paper, and you had the dynamic CVV code. It was very interesting solution for payment when you are pay online. You are making some payments online. Later in 2016, the whole team was moved to connectivity, and we started the new project, digital personalization system. And in 2018, I changed the position. Before, the Marek Śmigielski was the architect, and later he moved to the business part. So he was a product owner, and I started a position of solution architect. Okay, I have a question to all of you. How many of you have made some decision and after you wanted to change it? Please raise the hand. Yeah, me as well, and no. Me as well. Generally, many times I made this decision because I didn't understand the context. I didn't know the bigger picture of what I want to make a decision, and that's why, for example, the architectural drivers can help you to create a better software which is more suitable for the requirements of the customer. And how many of you are aware of architecture drivers? First time I heard this during the DNA course. Very nice, created by Jakub Kubriński, Jakub Pilemon, and Łukasz Szydło. If you didn't have a chance to attend to this course, definitely I recommend it. In 2014, the Michael Killing defined the architectural drivers as something what has a significant influence over your architecture. He created in 2014 a very nice article when he tried to describe it. And during this talk, it will be divided into the 3 parts. First will be a little bit introduction to architectural drivers, because as I saw, not many of you are aware of it. Then we will talk about the ADR, Architecture Decision Record. And at the end, we will go through some milestones on DPS to see how the drivers influence the final shape of the application. We can ask, is there one solution, right solution for each software? Definitely, there is no any silver bullet. Everyone knows that. We have different types of architectures like monolith, microservices. Currently, I was on the DevOps, and event-based architecture was the most popular. But generally, Kubriński on this DevOps said that, Noberdalik said on this DevOps that there is not such thing as a great or good architecture. Generally, we have to select some specific things which drives our application. We cannot select everything. So very important is to define and prioritize them, the drivers which to find the correct solution for the correct context. This is what Jakub Kubriński said last week on the online conference, that architecture is not some description of diagrams, the description of database schema or API. It's more like the set of decisions. We are making some of decisions during the lifetime of the product, and because we made this kind of decision, the architecture looks in this way. And everything is connected with the context. In our case, we have two different components which are responsible for profile generation. One is a profile generator. Second one is a dynamic profile provider, and both have similar responsibility. They should create the profile, but they are working in completely different context. That's why we cannot assume that decision which we make on the context X will be still valid on the context Y. In DPP, the most important is high availability, the performance. On the other hand, because this is the download process, it's a real-time process, and we have to be fully, we should fully be, we should have a huge availability in this case. In case of PGS, this is more batch process. Still, we are generating the profiles, but in a little bit different way, and accessibility and flexibility of the process is much more important than, for example, performance. When we are talking about the architecture drivers, we can divide them in four categories. First two are technical and business constraints. As the constraints are fixed, we shouldn't change them. For example, when we have a budget that 200 milestones we have on some project, and later we want to reduce the number to 100, it's completely change the context, and that's why we should start from the beginning and once again do some analysis and to find what drivers are the most important for us. In case of technical, we are thinking about the things like, in our case, we have to deploy on the Kubernetes, so we have to be compliant with 12-factor and so on. So there are some restrictions given by the company, for example. On the business, we are thinking more about the budget, about the deadlines, and so on. Then we have the functional requirements. It's the most common because generally you are creating the application for some requirements. But when we have only functional requirements, we can create the same application in multiple different ways. For example, yesterday we had a talk created by Venkat about the parallel and multi-threading mechanism. And he was asking, for example, that reactive programming will be destroyed by virtual threads or not. And he said that there are two different ways, and as a developer, it's nice that we have a choice and we can choose one or second solution, but we have to be aware and to understand why we should choose one technology instead of second one. So the last one is quality attributes, which are very related with the functional requirements. Functional quality attributes are like performance, security, maintainability, interoperability, reliability, or usability. And generally, they should be defined in the smart way. So we are not saying that application has to be fast. Rather, we should say that some function has to respond in 5 milliseconds during some, when the system is has a 30 transactions per second, for example, during such a volume of requests. So they are very specific, and it's very easy to say that we are passing it or not. And always this is kind of trade-off. We have to select the most one which is important for our context in a given moment. For example, we introduced some functionality on Profile Designer where the customer could create the XML, put the XML, and create the XML signature based on this XML. And at the beginning, he was able to put any XML, but also with some DDT, for example. And the application had a vulnerability like the XML entity attack. So on the other hand, we had to fix this and make some kind of blacklisting or whitelisting. And because of that, we reduce a little bit usability, but in this case, security was much more important. So we should be aware and understand what kind of driver is right now for us the most important. This is some kind of example which will show how this the drivers are influenced on some specific use case. Sorry. So we have some application has the drivers on some level. This is abstraction. So, but we can say that everything is on 10. Later, the business wanted to create new functionality. And because of that, we increased the functionality from 10 to 12. So everyone is happy, but the downside of this change is that we decreased the performance. And it was not acceptable by the business at this moment. And they didn't expect that this is the critical function, so we cannot accept this kind of change. That's why we had to create some change to fix it. But we had a hard deadline. This is the business constraints, and we had some team which wasn't experienced in some technology which could create a solution which is proper and didn't create some technical debt. But we had this kind of constraints. We make some workaround and we increase the performance to the previous value, but we decrease the maintainability. And maybe this is something what we accept. But during this talk, about the technical debt, when Miłosz, Kuba, and Oberthur were talking about the technical debt, it's very important to be aware of it. So, from business point of view, it's acceptable that we created it, but we should be aware of it. And in the future, when we will make another change connected with this functionality, for example, then we should take into account that we created some kind of technical debt, and probably we should fix it, or we should put more story points to fight with it. Next thing is the documentation of this kind of decisions, and this is the architecture decision record. This is the template which we are using in our applications. So we have the status, context, decision, and consequences. There are different templates. We choose this one because for us was the most interesting. And when we created, where we were creating a new application, we had to decide what kind of Java we want to use. And at the beginning, we were thinking that 13 will be okay, but we had some discussion with security team that there is no LTS version. We found out that Sonar is not compatible with this version, and that's why we had to choose the 11. This decision is written somewhere, and it will be very easy to find why we decided to use this version instead of 13 at the time. Maybe when we will try to upgrade to 17, we will check this document and update it after upgrading to the newest version. And on the left side, you can find other documents which we created. For example, why we decided to have the hexagonal architecture, or why we introduced some rate limiter on one of the interface. And it is very, very easy to understand our change. Even if we introduce some technical debt, then we have the full awareness why it happened. Sometimes we have more than one solutions, and then we have to write which is the most suitable for our use case. So from some ADR, the benefits definitely it's team awareness, improve the maintenance, productivity, and so on. Onboarding, ownershiping, alignment with other teams components. So generally, this kind of documents are very, very important. And the guys in the morning, Andrzej, Łukasz, Adam, were saying about some automatic documentation, and we are automatically pushing this kind of documents on the Confluence, and it's very, very easy to find and to read them. The question is when we should write the ADR, and on the internet you can find some diagram created by Spotify, but conclusion is that almost always when you have some significant change on your architecture, probably you should write to have a better understanding why you made it later. Now we will go through some DPS milestones, but the first will be a story about the CPS, because at the beginning we tried to use it, and this is some kind of context story why we decided new application instead of using existing solution. And in IDEMIA we have CPS, which is very successful story, because generally they are provision 1 million of profiles in each factory. So during this time, probably it was 1 billion of profiles. So generate a lot of money for IDEMIA. But it wasn't very successful from our point of view, and because we are living a little bit in the different context. They focus on the payment card and SIM card, where we on the market we saw that another devices are coming. For example, eSIM on the M2M or consumer. The M2M solution is more like the server is connecting with the car and try to upload the profile update or something like that. When the consumer is more connected, the device is connecting to the server and try to download the process. Currently we have the iPhone 13, which has a SIM and SIM, but there is a chance, I'm not saying that it's for sure it will be in this way, but maybe next year will be device which has only a SIM. So definitely this market will grow very fast. Yep. And the beginning, why not choose the CPS? Because it's almost the same. Yes, you are able to personalize the cards on the CPS. Why we shouldn't use it also on a SIM card? But generally, we found out that this is proprietary solution, and it was very hard to work with CPS from the developer point of view. And definitely, this is not what we like the best. And why we didn't want to have the CPS first? There is some proprietary language like Gold. Extension is GOT, and environment E1. Of course, you can find on some internal presentation that it's a great tool, but generally it's far away from our expectation in the modern year, modern time. And definitely it's very hard to find GOT developers. We worked with some nice guys from France, like Anas, Philippe, Stefan, Claude. I recommend them because it was very, very nice to cooperate with them. But generally, this is not something very common to find this kind of skills. And and definitely you cannot find any valuable things on the internet like stack overflow for GOT or GOT. It's not existing. When we are talking about the GOT, I remember the talk which was prepared by Sławek Somutka, and he was talking about GOT classes. Maybe he was thinking about this one, but I'm not sure. Another one is pull request. Probably in which I am only one person who made one pull request to the E1 environment, and definitely this is something not easy to do. Generally, you have to create some Word document, you have to put the code there, you have to mark the code you are changing with yellow background, and you are sending this Word to integrator, and he tries to put it on the environment. Generally, it's not easy, but maybe this is, and one thing more, I'm not judging, because as I said at the beginning, CPS, it's a successful story. In their context, maybe everything was okay. For our digital world, maybe this is not exactly what we expect and the way how we work, but I'm not judging at all. Delivery time also was very problematic because you had to wait 3 months until your change will go to the staging and 6 months until you can get your change on the production. Complicated, unmaintainable, inflexible. Generally was very, very hard for us. Then we tried to adapt to CPS. And we tried to execute Java in EWAM. We tried to convert code to Java and create the separate service integrated with CPS. But all of them were wrong concepts. Even Ninja, Krzysztof Szcześniak tried to convert, got to Java, but finally we decided that this is not our path. And at the end, we tried to forget about CPS and to create own solution. But for us, the domain was not known. This was something new, and this is what we were worried at the beginning. And the initial knowledge which we had, that the process looks like in this way, and still it's valid. And to be honest, even in DPS, still a CPS is used in this ID card image part. So they still some of the process belongs to CPS. But this year we made event storming, and we found out that the process is a little bit more complicated. And you can believe me, but two of these orange cards are this process. So still it's valid, but each a little bit bigger. Luckily, the Andrzej Bratny came to us. Andrzej was a person who worked in MNO, on MNO side. He know a lot of details about the SIPes and this kind of things. We had very nice team, and we had very great architect, Marek Zieliński, and thanks to that we were able to create some MVP. And we started our journey to the Dark Tower. And this is the milestones which we had. So first we will talk about the MVP DPS. We had some kind of functional requirements which had a huge impact on the final solution. First was to create some profile description, the template, how the profiles has to be created. The tech team, it's a user of our application. That creates the production orders. So you have the template, you have some input file, and then you can generate the number of profiles. But we had to also give the possibility to work offline and to be able to download the profiles using the card reader locally, and to have some integration with SFTP of MNOs, because generally the files on MNO are sent via such an interface. We had also at the beginning short time to market because we had the GSMA specification, and we had to prepare as fast as possible some MVP to be able to pass the certification. Some technical constraints like Kubernetes, that the inbound traffic to HSA is not allowed, geo redundancy, and some quality attributes. They're mostly connected with the security. And as a consequences, we created the Profile Designer, this UI application in JavaFX technology, mostly because this offline mode had to be used. But generally, right now, we have a problem with versioning. Very hard is write to any UI test. We duplicate some functionalities between CPS, its other UI on what way, a little bit different one. We had some custom authorization, and currently it's pretty hard to use SSO or this kind of solution, which are provided by for example, clouds. And one thing more, that at the beginning this was a POC of this application, but still after 5 years it's POC. That's why it's very hard to work with it. And lately we have a plan even to replace it finally with some other solution. Then we choose the Cassandra because we have this geo redundancy requirement. but it was given by us, not by given from outside. So it's very important to see whether this constraint is our or it's taken from some outside, because sometimes we are making it as a constraint, but maybe this is functionality, and functionality can be negotiable. But in case of constraints, it's fixed. You shouldn't change it. That's why we still have a Cassandra in Profile Warehouse, but this is the backend service for UI. So everyone who knows how Cassandra works, is not pretty nightmare to the UI, because the business wants to have searching, finding the all elements by any field. Of course, you can put some another element between between service and Cassandra, but generally it's much more complicated, and probably this was not the best decision based on some requirement which probably it's not fits very well to this component. We decided also the Cassandra will be only Cassandra will be in profile generator. But generally, right now, we have some issue with lightweight transactions, because some of the process on the PGS side is transactional. So of course, you can force the Cassandra to make to be more transactional way, but this is not a good approach in Cassandra. So generally, currently, for example, we have problems with migration to Cosmos DB. And then we choose to use the ActiveMQ broker between SCA and HSA, but because forbidden inbound traffic to HSA, but generally also this is not exactly the truth. And because we had the integration with SFTP, and we had only Cassandra in PGS, it was very hard to implement something which allow us to create more than one profile generator, because you can have only one single consumer on a SFTP site. Of course, it's possible, but Cassandra fits very well here, because you should avoid the queue on Cassandra. And this is the final architecture. So at the beginning, we have this computer with offline mode with Profile Designer. Then the Profile Warehouse, we had to make this MTLS. So there's authorization based on a custom authorities. Maybe this is not custom, of course, this is certificates, but it's not standard like SSO. And then we have this Cassandra, which is connected to Profile Warehouse, ActiveMQ, which integrated the SCA with HSA. But again, this is not what we needed at this moment. HSM, because of course the certification requires this kind of things. On the profile generator side, we have some secrets, keys generated, and we have to do it always with HSM. Cassandra connection with Smart Connect, it's SMTP, and integration with MNO via SFTP. Then we decided that we have to. There was a new requirement that we have during the previous implementation, PGS allowed to provision the profile to SMDP, but during the download, always the profile was taken from the SMDP. And now we try to implement new solution to generate dynamically the profile. So when the device is asking for some profile, but the profile which is stored on SMDP, it's not valid for this device, they can ask us to generate dynamically this profile. And business constraints was also as always, short deadline, level of complexity, and based on such drivers, we decided to have something wrong. It's but maybe this was acceptable at this moment. We had two services which talks to the same tables. Generally, you shouldn't do this kind of things. But maybe the drivers which we had at this time caused us to do it. And that's why it's so important to write the ADR to have the full understanding why we choose such made some decision, and of course, we fixed it later. Where is the problem when we have a shared database? That even the profile generator could put into valuation, for example, some data which are not correctly parsed by profile designer. So the batch process will impact the dynamic profile provider, what is completely not acceptable during this time. That's why, oh, yeah, sorry. So this is the change which we introduced, new component with the shared database, and mConnect was connected to this service to get on real time the profiles. But finally, we know that we created some kind of technical debt, so we tried to resolve it. So the business concept is that real-time process is not impacted by the batch process, and changes on the schema does not affect any DPP, and opposite, of course. Performance required but not defined. This is many times we have this kind of problem, so we had to make some assumptions, and on the CI level we are checking, but it was our assumption. We didn't know exactly what the business expect, how the application will be, how fast it will be. It's very hard to be prepared for such thing, and because of that, for example, we are using reactive programming because we think that we are not fast enough, and we complicate the application, but maybe the maintenance was much more important in case of, because standard sequence code will be enough. And then the data sent are protected with the key. So we created something like that. Profile generator was, there was no new interface between profile generator and the profile dynamic provider with the separate database. So finally, it looks better, and it was finally this is the separate modules instead of very high coupling. And at the end, this year we start a new MVP. This is the newest child in our platform. This is the requirement, so we wanted to give the possibility to customer to send to us profiles which are not generated by dynamic profile provider or PGS, and these profiles are redirected to the SMDB right now, but in the future it will be stored on the site because not always the customer are using our platforms. Sometimes the TPS is provisioning not to our SMDP, and the same, not always the profiles are generated on our site. Of course, we had some small budget, 2 sprints to do it, and before we tried to define on all of the constraints and to predict something. Of course, you are not able to predict everything, but we were aware that we have to be ready for cloud, that we have to have the auto-scaling, extensibility of this feature was the most important, and this hexagonal architecture. So in case of some moving from monolith to microservices, will be much easier to do it. And the threat model. So thanks to such extensible architecture, we allowed for new functionalities, which we will add probably at the end of the year, increase performance for the specific customer, storing profiles for any data, forwarding SMDP with other interfaces, and so on. This is the current modular architecture which we have. As you see here, each module is not talks without the API. Always we have some kind of API between them. So in the future, probably we will have a lot of workers. The worker is responsible for the work for the given customer, and probably we'll have to, this part has to be scaled much more. So this is the small view of how it looks like right now. So we have some customer platform, and the customer can send the profile to SMD profile storage, and then the profile storage is right now the forwarding it to the smart connect. But in the future, of course, there will be some storage. We are ready for Cosmos DB or other native services with these workers. And we will have to have some kind of integration with profile provider. So the smart connect can ask us and should be transparent for SMDP, whether it's asking the profile storage or it's asking the profile provider. If the storage does not have this kind of profile, then probably we should generate it by ourselves. And this is the review of it. So the history of this evolution of DPS. Of course, we had much more important maybe but I try to focus on the most interesting and where we accepted the technical depth, but we had a full awareness of it. And after, for example, we had a room to fix it. Or here we made a lot of analysis before we started to have the full understanding what is expected for us for this component. Yeah, and that's all. Yeah. So thank you.